This is What's It Like with Dr. Ken Tangen.
Hi, this is Ken Tangen. This is episode 71 of What's It Like. My guest is David Allen, somewhere in the brown hills of California. Hi, David.
Hi, Ken.
So, are you in Ojai?
Actually, right now I'm in Santa Barbara. My wife and I moved here about 3 months ago.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah, it's lovely. We decided after 20 years in the country, time for a little city life, if you could call Santa Barbara city life. But compared to Ojai, it sort of is, you know?
That's true. It has a much nicer beach.
Yeah. Well, actually, we moved close to town so we could, use our nice, wonderful Dutch bikes and bike to our favorite restaurants and bank and all that and walk there even. In case
Wow, how fun.
Yeah, it's great.
So did you grow up in California?
I did not grow up in California. No, I grew up in Louisiana.
Oh, you're a long way from home.
Little East Texas and Louisiana, yep.
Mm-hmm.
First 6 years in East Texas at a little town called Palestine, Texas. And then from age 6 to age 19 in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Oh.
Aside from a year, I spent a year in Switzerland as an exchange student between my junior and senior year in high school. So,
did you like that?
I loved that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great experience. Are you kidding? It was fabulous. Certainly opened my horizons.
Yeah. Did you come from a large family?
No, my dad died when I was real young, so my mom pretty much raised me and an older brother by herself, so it was just the three of us. I have a brother that's 4 years older than me.
So who had the biggest influence on you when you were growing up?
My mom.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was pretty ill for several years, even before he died, so I don't have very many memories of him, and he was not really that significant a factor in raising me.
Mm-hmm.
At least not that I can remember or am aware of, anyway.
What was your major challenge as a child?
So trying to figure out who I was. I'm the kind of kid that could not stand conflict, or arguments or negative things at all. My parents didn't have any kind of a relationship like that because, again, my dad was so ill and he and my mom got along very well, and so I wasn't raised in an environment where sort of conflict resolved it to anything, and so I was very uncomfortable with that. So I did everything I could to make sure I kept people happy and kept people away from me. So I got very good. I learned a lot of good skills, how to social skills, how to be funny, how to be sort of everybody's favorite kid in lots of different ways, but then who was I in all that? So that was, there a lot of good things about it. I got popular and made good grades and, was sort of everybody's good friend, which was, kind of a nice way to, a nice, pleasant sort of childhood in that way. But again, where was David in all that? And so finding out who he was and what my edges were like and what I really wanted, kind of, the world be damned. That was my 20s or 30s before that really started to show up.
What was school like for you?
Relatively easy. I sort of bought into the idea. My mom taught school, and I sort of bought into the self-image that we were smart and bright and made good grades. So, I was a straight A kind of kid.
Mm-hmm. So did you always want to be a writer?
No. Well, yes, I guess in the back of my head, there was a part of me that always loved that. I had a great opportunity to have a brother-in-law. Actually, I had a much, much older half-sister who had wound up moving back to New York and had been part of the beat scene in New York City in the 50s. And she married relatively, well, within that world, a pretty well-known writer, John Cleland Holmes. And John was acted as my brother-in-law. And so when I was 9 and had a chance to travel to Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and hang out and spend time with my sister and her husband, I saw sort of what that sophisticated writer lifestyle was like, and I loved that idea. I just thought that was fabulous. So there was this kind of romance around all that, as well as they were about as hip and sophisticated as one could get in the late 50s relative to New York and Connecticut and the whole beat scene. I mean, my brother-in-law and Kerouac coined the word beat together in Central Park, and they were good friends with Kerouac and Ginsberg and all that whole group of folks. So I had an interesting very, very sort of intense little window into a very sophisticated world at a young age, and it attracted me, and it was fascinating. So, yeah, that was always kind of the back of my mind. Wouldn't that be a cool way to make a living?
We're recording this a few weeks early, but we'll probably release this podcast on your birthday.
Ah.
Did you ever think you would be this old?
Gee, no, not really. I thought I figured, well, I might be, but these are really old people that get to be 60,
Yes.
66. Gosh, those are like really old people.
Yeah. I'm a couple of years younger than you, but it never entered my mind that you could actually be old.
Yeah. Well, as you know, every decade you start to recognize people, you start to recognize distinctions between, I can tell the difference between people 70 and people 80 now. It's like, what? There's a difference? I remember when anybody over 45, they were just old.
You're very successful as a writer. How did you become a writer?
Well, it's still not my day job, believe me. It's really sort of a, and oh, by the way, why don't I put all this stuff in, or put a bunch of this stuff in writing? Really, it's not the primary focus of my professional career. It certainly has helped it a ton.
So consulting is your major work?
Well, I have a consulting, training, coaching, education company really around productivity, individual and organizational productivity. So I have, a company of 45 people, and we do, I have staff that do live instruction, training, seminars, workshops around the world. We have products about all of that. We also sell my books, of course, and I still do keynote speaking and give seminars and all that. So it's kind of a wide-ranging, number of things that I do, and writing and contributing now essays and into social media, and 3 books, have certainly helped in terms of the career. It's my career itself, and the brand, certainly has been a significant factor to that. Sure.
So what exactly do you do?
Well, it ranges all over the place. I was just last week, coaching, spending desk side, real time coaching senior executives in Washington, D.C. The week before that, I was in Poland giving a keynote speech to ING Bank, like 600 people. And that was, web broadcast as well as live in a big auditorium in Southwest Poland. I write blogs. I interview people in my network for our online community. We have a community of many thousands of people that are online and participating in the methodology that I sort of constructed and synthesized and pulled together. And what else? I spend time talking to strange, psychologists on the phone, who want to record this and share this with kids who are not quite sure where and how and what they're going to do later in life. So very happy to sort of be available ad hoc to share any of my experiences with other folks out there.
What's the best thing about your job?
That it's always changing. It's always different. I mean, I had 35 professions by the time I was 35. I remember that because when I was 35, I sat down and just counted up how many things I'd done in my life for money, and it would equal the number of years that I was. So that's always stuck as an icon in my historical memories there. So after 35 professions, it's either consultant or flake. I mean, those are your only 2 options. There's not much you can do if you say, well, I can't stick around with anything. So I finally discovered, well, what I like to do is just show up and look around and say, how can we make things easier here? And then, help people set up processes to make it easier, and then look around and say, well, now I'm bored. What else do I do? And I just thought you had to change jobs. But then I discovered one day they actually pay people money to do that, and they call them something. So, that made that big transition. I couldn't spell it. Now I are one, and hung out my shingle, IR consultant. Mm-hmm. And, that was 1981, I think. And since then, I've never had to change the profession because it's a profession that never is the same anyway. I always walk into totally different and unique situations and people. And the cool thing is it gave me the opportunity to research and find what are some of the useful models and what are the useful ways of thinking and what are the useful structures and processes that I can take anywhere and show up with anybody who might want to improve their situation, get more done with less effort. And it would invariably work to help improve, give them more sense of control, more of a sense of focusing on what they need to focus on. And that was great. And being as lazy as I am, it was great to, come up with something that I don't have to show up with anything except me. And, just people need to have an openness to what it is. And, I can share it with them. We can work it together. And it's something I can teach them to do. So I'm as much an educator and probably a motivator, I suppose, as anything else in terms of just, a model that improves people's life and work.
Let me turn the question around. What's the worst thing about your job?
You never know where it's coming from, where it is next. I'm trying to think if there is a worst thing about it. Notice, I suppose if there was, it is a flip side that, you kind of have, you either have the freedom and flexibility or you have security. So, which take your pick. It's kind of the good news and the sometimes the challenging news. Depends on what side of the bed I wake up in the morning. Like if I wake up with my nice, good ego strength, I go, wow, terrific. We have lots of latitude and freedom. I wonder what today will bring and how we'll take, advantage of that to move things forward. Or sometimes I wake up and I go, oh my God, I'm not sure where it's coming from or what's going to happen next.
Is there anything that has surprised you about your job?
Surprised me. Yeah, well, it's not so much about the job, but the content of my job. What's kind of surprised me is that something that is essentially as simple and elegant as what it is I wound up discovering, actually takes a long time for people to understand, integrate, and implement, so that it becomes sort of their work and lifestyle as well. So I think that's a lot of what I've learned is how challenging it is to take on educating the world. If you're trying to make it stick, you should know that as an educator. You can know something very simple, but getting it to stick that's a whole nother thing. As I say, it took me 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out, but I figure probably the next 25 to figure out how to distribute it, educate it, pass it on to other people, and also how to build a business model on it so that there's a cash register on the flow, so that it still provides me an ability to do more of it and expand it. So, all that's the creative challenge of what I do, So it's ultimately a fun game.
Mm-hmm. I always thought your training should be presented backwards, that the essential part of it is the last thing that you teach, which is to have a review.
Mm-hmm. And
because without that review, whether it's weekly, daily, whenever it is, the system will die.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that if you taught it backwards, like backward chaining in psychology is a big thing, that's where I would start in training.
Interesting. Yeah.
Have you played with different ways of presenting your material?
We're doing that right now. We're really in a big reinvention mode because we're about to go global in terms of a franchise model of getting and so in order to do that, we have to sort of bake down our education in the most elegant format that's sort of translatable in a very generic and universal way. So how do you teach universally that, and how do we best do that? And to your point, what was a linear, logical, cognitively logical model may not be the most effective way to get people on board fast. Mm-hmm. And also, how do you teach people to teach it quickly? Much like the martial arts, as long as you have a well baked in model and some sort of a inherent structure of training, you can have a green belt teach a white belt and a brown belt teach a green belt. In other words, you don't have to be totally the best or a black belt person to be able to communicate, effectively to other people things that would improve what they're doing. So long story short, yes. So we're in the process of trying to reinvent ourselves and understand better how to reach people and to, get it to stick and for people to, test it out. It's a very experiential model. I mean, you can read my book and understand it cognitively, but it's very, very different thing to sit down and actually pick up a piece of paper and say, what the heck is that? And what is my next action? And then to keep track of the inventory of all of your commitments. And to your point, to step back and look at it on some regular basis and reflect and review. Yeah, big challenge.
You have lots of different pieces of the puzzle to keep track of. What type of person would be good at your job?
Probably somebody who would get bored pretty easily doing the same thing over and over and over. So, people say, gee, which part of my job do I enjoy best? And I said, well, what I enjoy is that it's also different. As I said, I might be one-on-one coaching a very sophisticated senior executive, in Washington, D.C. one day. That night be on a very interesting interview with people about how to work with kids and the next day be standing in front of, hundreds of people in a large auditorium in Poland. So actually, that's what I really love. I really love that opportunity to do it. It's why I like travel too. It's almost like sort of I get to pretend that I show up as a different person. Travel. It's one of the handy illusion, to grow yourself is to, give yourself an excuse to show up and say, okay, it's new, it's different. And also, quite frankly, I've always loved hotels and airports and eating out. I think since you asked me about my childhood, one of the reasons we didn't have much money growing up, and my mom worked for civil service to raise me and my brother, and the only time we got to go out to eat was when I made straight A's. So there had to be some part of me that got tied in, click, wow, so somehow whenever I go out to eat, and that could be McDonald's or it could be the Four Seasons, I guess there's a part of me that says, I guess I'm smart because I get to go out to eat. Anyway, I like to at least play that myth anyway.
What a good reward system.
Yeah. Well, I see you were recommending Karen's book, and Karen's a friend of ours, Karen Pryor's Don't Shoot the Dog. Fabulous stuff, clicker training and operant conditioning, great stuff.
So if I wanted to, in the large sense, how would someone get a job like yours?
You probably have to make it up. My job didn't exist. I had to sort of think about something, think I wanted what I wanted, and then sort of cobble together pieces of it until it sort of suddenly became a job. And I said, well, let me just keep doing this and see if I can keep getting paid for it. So I think you have to, care about what you're doing in terms of content, and then how do I build a structure around that so I can keep doing more of it. And how do I, provide a business model to myself? In other words, how do I get paid to do what I do so I can do more of it? So I think you need to have probably a combination of humility and some level of guts or ego strength or stupidity that says, okay, let me just walk out into the world and assume I can make something happen and assume that I'm just valuable enough as a human being. And if I show up, I will produce value in some way, and I'll give them the money back if they don't think it was. So I've always had that sort of. So yeah, I think you have to have enough guts to be able to do that, or enough stupidity, one or the other.
You started as a consultant and then wrote your book.
Yeah.
Is that the order you would recommend?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm a database of one, so I don't have I don't have a big set of data to compare it to. That's how I did it. Basically I just did, well, let me just do good work and get paid for it. And again, I thought I was the last guy in the world to learn this stuff. So to me, it was kind of the good and bad news that I've never had any traditional formal education in business or psychology. And, maybe that's the good news, because I was too stupid to know that I didn't really know anything. Mm-hmm. And I just went out and, feet on the street, just literally street smarts, and just kept saying, okay, does that work? Does that work? Does that work? And I also, had some interests. I was very interested in both sort of personal growth and self-development, just for myself personally. I was curious about all that, as well as I found over the years, and I wasn't that conscious of it when I made that choice to begin with, but I've always been fascinated by models, by sort of invisible models or invisible things that if you apply them, it actually improves or changes the world. So I've always been, I mean, that's the laziest. I'm the laziest guy in the world. So I thought if I could figure out how to take invisible stuff and make physical, visible things happen, then wouldn't that be cool? So I've always been attracted to that. I mean, that's why I was originally a philosophy major and then a history major. And, I was always been fascinated by paradigms, belief systems.
You may have not graduated with a degree in business or in psychology, but you're a well-educated person.
Well, uh, in terms of traditional education, yeah, I got a BA and did a little bit of graduate work, postgraduate in history.
Hmm. And then you add to your own education with a lot of reading.
Sure. And a lot of experiential stuff. I got very interested in experiential learning, in the personal growth movement in the 70s and 80s, back in the heyday when a lot of that was, being experimented with and explored. How do you grow yourself? Life 101 kind of things. How do you learn to manage? I mean, they don't teach you in school. How do you manage relationships? How do you manage honesty? How do you manage communication? How do you manage the aspects of life that create effectiveness or undermine your effectiveness as a human being and in relationships? They don't teach that in school. Well, maybe they do. I mean, maybe they do now, but that they didn't have, how to get along with your parents 101, in high school, or how do you actually go, create the kind of world you want? They probably do now, but they certainly didn't when I was there, and I was always curious about all of that, and I figured I've always been somewhat haunted, I guess, by the idea of there's something bigger, better out here or around us that somehow is orchestrating all of this, and I just want to find out what that is so I can, play on the bigger game. So I've always had that. Not so much a drive. I'm too lazy to be driven to do anything, and passion is highly overrated. But an incessant curiosity, I suppose.
Although you did write a book.
Yeah, and boy, that's a challenge, especially when it's not your day job and you're trying to, create a startup little company at the same time. Very challenging piece of work to do, especially when you're putting your whole life work into a book. I mean, that's really what I did. I decided, again, since writing wasn't my profession, but at the time, just given where I was professionally, by that time, I figured out that I had figured out something that was pretty unique, and also I tested it in some of the, toughest places on the planet that would test out the model to see if it really worked, and would I really be willing to put it in print and say, hey, folks, this will absolutely improve your life and your ability to get stuff done. And it took me until, in my let's see. It was published in '01, so how old was I then? Yeah, so it took me until then for me to really feel confident that I could put that into a book, and I just said, let me just put it all in there. So getting things done. My first book was really a manual, and it still is. It's an evergreen book. I don't think anybody will write another one like that. So that was a labor of love and lots of agony, trying to figure out how to get it simple enough and get it into a book format, because that's quite even if you know what you're talking about and your content, and even if you know how to write. My mom was an English teacher, so I did all my own writing. I did not have any anybody doing any ghosting for this for me. So that was, even though I knew how to do that, boy, putting stuff in a book, that's a whole different medium. So that was a learning experience to go through that process.
So why do you think your book was so successful?
It's a good book.
It is.
It's really good. I mean, it's great material, and it really works. It's instantly works. And I think there are lots of reasons. I think the timing was right. I think it's a book whose time had come in terms of the world was ready for that information and hungry for it.
I would also add that it's well written.
Yeah, thanks. It is, and that was a lot of work. I had a fabulous editor who was a great coach. She was very understated and did not try to manipulate me to write it her way. She really let me find my own voice with it, and gave me just the greatest coaching along the way. And also, we did 2 line edits on that thing, because one of the things we wanted to do was to make sure that we stripped out all the business buzz jargon and any kind of temporal stuff. I think we still have VCR in there somewhere, so that probably could go. Most kids don't even know what that is. So I think there's maybe a word or 2 in there, but for the most part, we went through it and took everything out so that it could be a universal book for years. with that and still be very current. And it still is. People have often asked, would I write another one of it? I say no. Nothing has changed whatsoever in terms of the content there and its relevance. But one of the things I did, by the way, to your point, in terms of writing it, and this is a tip for anybody else who ever might want to do any writing, I took the copy edits, and I was afraid a copy editor would lose the voice. Just the opposite. A good copy editor, as I say, gives your text a bath. So it really sounds much more like what you wanted to say to begin with. So you take 25 words and they do it in 12. You go, God, that makes it better. And what I did was I actually went back, pulled up a word processor, and reinserted all of the line edits myself, so that I could train myself to think like a line editor. And that was really useful.
The book was very successful, and you have other books which are also successful. Do you like being famous?
It's bemusing. Yeah, it's not something I don't like. One of the things that I wanted to do many years ago, and this was what helped me a lot in my own career development, and from the inside out, was really realize that I wanted the ability to have a voice and to have an audience, so that that I could add value to, and that I could assist. But if nobody listens to you, if nobody cares who you are or where you are, you don't have much of an opportunity to share something of value. So I think there was a part of me that always wanted an audience, and certainly a receptive audience. What I don't like are critics, and people that are unhealthily skeptical, or just want to put you down. That's no fun. But if I have a positively inclined group of people, then it turns out to be it's good for all of us. So so there's a part of me that certainly likes it more than I dislike it in terms of the ability to have an audience. Of course, then the challenge is, well, I think I've said everything there is to say, and so there's nothing else to say. Then you have an audience that shows up, and you go, well, let me see what else there is. And probably, if there's one miracle in my life, it's how many different ways I've been able to say 12 things, for the last 20 years.
Greatest Hits is still popular with a lot of people. So.
Yeah.
I think of fame as being at levels. What level of fame are you at?
Boy, compared to how famous people can be, heavens.
But do people stop you on the street?
They're starting to, in very random moments. Not a whole lot. I mean, I don't have the face to go, oh my God, that's that guy. Sometimes it's my voice, because a lot of there's a lot of people that have my audio materials out there. One of the most fun stories was I was doing a couple of workshops in Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was trying to fly out of Tallinn, out of Estonia, on Estonian Airlines. They tried 2 or 3 times and couldn't take off. So we were sitting there, just kind of sitting there, waiting to try the third time to see if they could get out of the airport. And I'm sitting there, and and there's seatmate chat with somebody next to me. And this couple sitting in front of me, and they were suddenly murmuring to each other. And finally, the guy in the seat in front of me just kind of sits up and turns around. He says, "Are you David Allen?" I went, "Oh my God!" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I've just been listening to you in my car." He was some technology executive from London. He and his girlfriend were on a vacation in Estonia, and he'd just been listening to me in his car in London as they've been driving to the airport, before they came on the trip. So it's that kind of thing that sort of shows up randomly out there. Not that often, but it does happen.
So there's not a crowd of people standing by you while you're eating dinner.
No, not yet. Well, if they really got what I was teaching, they'd probably all run. What? Keep track of every single thing I've committed myself and potentially meaningful thing in my life, and get it out of my psyche and look at it regularly. Yeah, right.
So, David, everybody has to give themselves motivation occasionally. How do you give yourself a kick in the pants?
I think reminding myself of the good work that there is to do, and that there is still, another chapter of it to do, and really realizing how many people around me, can get value out of, participating with this work. So, I think that's a lot of it. Usually I get inspired if I just throw myself out there in the world and just start engaging with people. I can closet myself away and kind of go numb and dumb pretty fast if I don't engage. So I think part of it, that's really my key, is just go participate. Go throw myself out there in front of a bunch of people, or be willing to take interviews like this. Be just keep participating. I think it's pretty easy to go, yeah, who needs all that? I'm bored. Go away. I just want to be by myself. So I think there's a part of me that on the negative side would just, if I could afford to do it, would probably just sort of dry up and blow away, if I didn't stay involved. So I think staying involved, just participating with people, is the big key. Big key for me, anyway.
Let me turn the question around. When you have to soothe yourself, how do you calm yourself down?
Well, and funny, in the same way, I do the same thing. Also, meditation and spiritual practices, just going sort of internal, hot baths work really well. My wonderful little dog is, just a cute little love bug. So she always calms me down a bunch just to play with her. Walk around the block, have a good glass of wine, great dinner. Those are fun things. Nice music is great. Massages. Hey, I love good massages. As well as yoga and stretching, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
All those goodies really work.
Is there an event in your life that has challenged you to the core?
Yeah, I almost died in the water in Hawaii about 3 years ago. I was out just snorkeling and decided I'd go be adventurous and go out and snorkel around some big point off the island, and kind of got lost, went further than I thought. I was just enthralled by looking at the fish underneath the water, and wound up in some very, very turbulent currents, and essentially got caught in a just a big undertow and waves, up against a whole bunch of coral rocks, and I almost drowned. And I'm trying to swim hard enough to be able to get out of there, be able to get to safety, it was touch and go. So I had a lot of conversations with the guy upstairs, or inside, or whatever, about, okay, this could be it. Let me see. So that was sort of a challenging, dramatic, physical situation for sure. So that was edgy.
Mm-hmm.
That was, it's interesting to get to that point where you go, okay, this could be it.
Is there an idea or a principle that helps you through your challenges?
Yeah, I think a connection to the larger spiritual realities is there's probably no better anchor than that, because there's not much of an anchor here. It's like what is stable, and from my own personal experience, there is stability at that level. It's a very subtle level, and I use spiritual with a small s, meaning stuff you can't see but is very real, in terms of just that kind of connection. So having a real connection to that, and whether you want to call that the bigger me inside of me, or the bigger thing that's out there that's connected to the bigger me inside of me, all that's pretty much the only stable rock upon which stuff can be built, I think.
If you were giving a commencement address for high school or college, what would be your best advice?
The best advice would be the best advice I think I ever got, particularly about career and life, which is give yourself permission to acknowledge your biggest fantasy about what you would like to be and do in their life. And don't hold back. Don't be embarrassed. And then ask yourself, what about that do I think that would give me as an experience that makes that so attractive? And then once you answer that, then look around and say, okay, right now, what can I do that could start to give me more of that experience? And don't wait for perfection. Get going. So that would be my best advice.
If you were doing your life over, is there one thing you wouldn't change?
Boy, I don't know that I'd change anything because, life has been great. All the hard knocks were learning experiences. So, as long as if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. So as long as if you ain't dead, then you got lots of strength to get from all that. So I don't think there's nothing I would change or want to give up. It's all been great, from a larger perspective.
I want to thank David Allen for joining me today. Thanks, David. I appreciate it.
Ken, my pleasure. Fun. Thanks.
If you'd like to leave a comment, ask a question, or get more info, go to what'sitlike.info.